Hey everybody, Corey from Aquarium Co-op. Today, we're going to learn about Daphnia because we've got a Daphnia Wizard in the flesh, and all of this is going on, mad scientist level, and I said, people are going to want to know, and by people, I really meant me to have a guide to come back to in video. So please, spill your guts on Daphnia.
Absolutely. So my name's SJ. We culture a lot of live foods as bare foundation of our larger fish room. Lots of our breeders enjoy live food. Daphnia, there's plenty of videos out there on YouTube about how people culture them, what they feed them. I find that if I run a larger culture, so each of these tubs, Daphnia Magna, Daphnia Moina, a lot harder to look into, but running these as my main cultures. This is what we harvest out of. You'll see the green water here. I have the 24-hour system of light continuously playing, things like that. But in terms of what we feed them, powdered fish food, yeast, we do a lot of test feedings and things. And the system that I like to run is, again, larger cultures that we harvest out of. Then we have smaller satellite cultures is how I refer to them as. If you look, there are some that are kind of really scaling up and popping off. So we've got the Magna here that you can see. Then there's others that are a little bit dwindled down, but you still got steed shrimp. So I do a lot of co-culturing. The only thing I don't want to co-culture with Daphnia is Hydra. Hydra will absolutely smash your Daphnia. You hear about it. I wish I could have gotten on video, but once I got like one of these bigger hunker Daphnias, I saw get barreled by a Hydra in one of my fry tanks. And I was like, okay, they can absolutely take out fry if they can take out that size of a Daphnia. So yeah, so outside of not culturing Hydra, making sure that the only thing that I'm making is usually invertebrates like copepods, snails. We have some pea puffers around, so.
Yeah, I noticed that there's snails in all of them, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, with the feeding, you've got different densities of food. So you have some that'll actually be sustained in the water column. You have others that go straight to the bottom. And then so for the things that go straight to the bottom, Daphnia are filter feeders, so they're not going to really be able to get to that food as easily. So what I like is to make sure that there's snails or some other type of detrivore at the bottom.
Good word. That's what I was getting at. And I was like, not everyone knows that word.
Yeah, so detrivore, right? So to eat the detritus and to make sure that that is just still within the same system, so it keeps the nutrients within the system. So eventually it'll either turn into green water, infusoria, or something where the Daphnia Magna, it's more palatable to them, basically. What you usually don't see because they're in the mulm are blackworms. So there are blackworms at the bottom of these. There's scuds. And most of them, scuds are really great at pulverizing different foods. So I find that variety is key with most things in life. It's absolutely key with some of the cultures. So I feed a combination of things. Like I said, powdered fish food is one of those. But a lot of my go-tos outside of the powdered fish food are any kind of like algae wafer, or you can also do zucchini, right? Like the boiled zucchini, things like that.
So are you looking for it to like bloom after you put it in? Is that
correct? Yes. So like with my aquacultures, I treat them like I treat my vermicomposting system. And so in vermicomposting, right? So you're using red wigglers and things to make what we call castings, and those castings go out into your garden and feed your plants, right? So there's a nice vibrant community on vermicomposting and what that entails. And so in that world, we refer to different foods as slow food or fast food. So you've got slower foods, which are things that are a lot harder to break down. That's usually things like a watermelon rind or like an apple or something like that. And then you've got faster foods that are basically smaller micron size. And so they're easier for the worms to ingest and kind of do something with. And so I usually just carry over that same tenet over to a lot of my other culturing systems. And in my head, when I'm feeding, I'm like, okay, is today a fast food day or a slow food day? Is this culture taking off? If it is taking off, then we want more fast food. So fast food in Daphnia land means usually yeast. So this people can run into some trouble with. You can crash your culture really easily with yeast, but
I mean,
you can
it tastes a
also
lot too.
yeah, definitely, right? And so that's why I like to mix green water in with my culturing system. Keeps the smell down, keeps the Daphnia happy. So this, it's really easy to overdo, but it's very easy to, if you want to rev up a culture, to do it predictably with the yeast. So what I find is I actually just powder it with a coffee grinder.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously fish room coffee grinder, key, one of the things as essential as a pipette, in my opinion. So just put the active dry yeast into that coffee grinder, pulverize it up, and it'll turn into what's more like a dust.
Where would I find these super usable containers?
Yeah, the
Getting a second life.
there you go. Yeah, that's the say. If you have ideas about what to do with your co-op containers. Sorry, I'm looking for the powder. Here it is. So what you'll have is, I just have labels on everything because a lot of the things aren't in the form that I bought them in. So this is the powder, right? So it's a standard powder. And so you can do this. And I usually just cut this water, mix it up, feed it to the Daphnia. There are other ways to do this.
And like how much powder?
Yeah, sure.
Like roughly, because I think it's like some people like feed a lot and like there's different amounts, different size containers.
Yeah, I find that if I feed like, this is too much. So this is a co-op scoop.
Yeah.
Right? This is overkill in terms of like for something like for the big one like this. So if I wanted to do like one powder scoop of this to like, we'll just cut it with however much water, it doesn't really matter. Shake it up, put this in. If you're feeding that heavy, you want to be around to watch what's going on.
Okay.
So I find that different people have different takes on whether or not to run oxygen to Daphnia cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I've had luck with both. I feel like if I could actually measure the oxygenation of the water, then I'd have more specific like takes on what's going on. But I do know that when the oxygen level drops, things start to suffer a little bit. And so usually when you put too much yeast into the water, it's a lot harder for the Daphnia to like get set.
I boil it down to fish room science. Like if you didn't want the air, you probably wouldn't have it. So it's like, it's good enough to keep it, I guess.
Sure, it helps things circulate and things like that. And so as more organisms kind of show up, so it's not like culturing things are like Mary Poppins, right? So some of these things I feel like float in on the air. So like I didn't put copepods in here.
Mm-hmm.
It just showed up, right? Like the snails I intentionally added, the blackworms, yes, but like the copepods, the seed shrimp, like all the smaller things in here, cyclops, those things kind of just showed up. So I didn't add those things. So as things like that mature and develop and little communities start to take off, I feel like more organisms are using up that oxygen in the water. And so at that point, it becomes a little bit more important, I think, to make sure you provide some aeration. So I feel like there's something there. Then that's why there might be a discrepancy between people that recommend aeration and not, is because of the maturity of the culture.
Sure.
And the number of organisms within it. But I'm not a scientist. That's just my fish.
I always ask people, like, just show us how you're doing it. Other people can tell you they're wrong while they're doing it in their house, and they don't have to use air, but...
Totes.
Yeah.
Totes, yeah. So I feel like there's lots of ways to do it. This is the way I do it. So the powder fish food, you just dilute it in water, shake it up, feed it. It usually keeps the Daphnia pretty happy. I try to feed usually once a day.
Okay.
To keep my cultures going. If I want to rev something up, definitely once a day. If I want to just have them remain active and passively just kind of produce, I don't feed them. I just let them kind of do what they're doing. So some of the snails will die because you're not providing so much food, create more green water, those types of things. So like all these little ecosystems are usually self-sustaining. I've had any of these crash. We established this system over here around Christmas. So it's cut a little bit for these guys.
So that'd be about
over here.
3 months. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's been pretty consistent. I haven't restarted any of these cultures. We just do water changes, things like that.
How often, so before we move on from food,
Yeah.
how often do you do the long feeding of like a zucchini slice or something in these?
Yeah, so usually what I try to do is feed it to where it would drop here. I try to do the long foods at least once a week.
Okay.
That's typically something that keeps things going pretty steadily.
And when we're talking, is it a slice? Is it a big hunk?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on what other detritivores you have in the system. So mine are really thick with snails and blackworms and things. So I would say like if you were to slice a zucchini in half and then slice that half into half, so a quarter.
Okay.
And that's usually pretty good for like something like this.
So like a whole quarter chunk. Okay, so that's quite a bit.
Yeah. And it usually is gone within about 3-4 days.
Okay.
So, and that's if, you know, it's been previously frozen, because obviously the cells in the vegetable kind of burst up and they're a little bit more palatable for the things with the small amounts. But if you put like an entire raw piece of zucchini, it might take a little bit longer.
And then, so obviously we're feeding, now we're water changing. Talk through that.
Absolutely. So usually when I harvest things, I use this net here. And so I usually take a cup of whatever I'm harvesting, right? So if it's like a cup of Daphnia, then I'll go and I'll pour it over this sink over here. And so we'll just pour it through, and y'all usually have another container with like water or something. I'll put the Daphnia.
Can we harvest some and feed?
For sure.
Because there's going to be people that watch this video that may have never seen it in real life. And like, this is a great example of like, we have light. He can do this.
Totally. All right. So we're going to have like a nice fresh, and this is just filtered water. It's not RO. It's just run through a carbon filter. So you just have this here. And what I'll do is I'll take a cup of whatever culture. Usually it's a cup that I only keep for this culture area. So this culture area is separate from the rest of our system, because I'm pretty strict on whether or not I dip things across things, because that's how you can get cross-contamination.
Sure.
A Hydra can show up, stuff like that. So usually what I'll do is, if I'm being good, I'm collecting this water and actually using it on my plants. But for all intents and purposes, I want to make sure I'm going through the right end of the net. We go through here, just pour it out. Obviously, you can stick the net into the container and do this, but I like doing this because if I'm doing it often enough, obviously that's just one little net. So
Yeah.
you do it often enough, then all you have to do is fill the water that you have, take it back over, and just top it off. And that's one way that I harvest. Another way is if I
And get the water change done.
Exactly. So another way, if I'm doing like a heavier water change on some of these systems, what I'll do is I'll get just a hose, clip it, hose, clip it, run it through the net, harvest that way, use that water in the garden, and then I will just take this, run it over here, and at that point we have a Rockio spout that's called Daphnia Island, and we'll just fire that off and it'll fill it up.
How do you decide when, ooh, this one needs the big water change?
Usually when I have a culture that's slowing down and I don't see a lot of Daphnia in there, but I know that I'm feeding to where it would be productive if it's doing well.
So you're doing the right things, but it's not getting the result you want.
Yes, that's when I try at least 25% water change. That, and in addition to if I fed really heavy and I'm like, I know that I'm pushing it. Maybe I fed like a whole co-op scoop of yeast and I know that I'm working in the fish room. I'll come back and check. And if everybody starts to kind of come up to the edge right now, the snails are doing what they do, right? They're foraging and things, but I also have cherry shrimp. I have a lot of things in here.
Oh, interesting.
And
Cherry shrimp.
yeah, what they'll do is they're my canary in the coal mine. That's so they'll come right up and then they'll just be like, hello. Like,
Water change, please.
I can't, so they are definitely telling me, hey, more oxygen, right? And so at that point, I'll be like, okay, this is a little too much. So I'll usually let it go for about an hour or so. Sometimes they are foraging up there, but a lot of times if they're still there after about an hour, I'm like, okay, we'll change the water. So before I leave the fish room that night, I'll do a 25% water change on that specific tub. But that's usually how I run most of the health monitoring on my cultures, because I don't have any of these crazy instruments that scientists use.
Sure.
So I co-culture, and usually the size of the animal, the bigger it is in relation to what you're culturing. So like if I'm culturing something super small like Daphnia, I'll make sure to co-culture with either a pleco or like a cherry shrimp or something like that, a larger animal that's going to tell me, hey,
I'm
enough
smart.
like world here that I like, right? Yeah. Oxygen, food, they'll tell me, hey, do something.
That's smart.
So then I'll just let the nature speak to me in that way. So
nice. Let me think here. So the water that goes in, I want to make sure other people know, because
Yeah.
to my knowledge, need to make sure no chlorine or chloramine will wipe it out. Is that your experience too?
I would say that your strains, so what people don't, what I've come to understand is that with inverts specifically, it's a lot faster. Whatever they build resilience to, it's just faster than what fish do. So like if you get a strain of Daphnia, for example, that, you know, that person babied that Daphnia, they only used rainwater, they only da-da-da-da. After a certain amount of just slow incremental changes, I'll find that you'll eventually have a strain that's going to be used to what you do.
Interesting.
So originally I had a strain that I got from my club auction, and I knew that he only used rainwater. So what I would do is I would just incrementally start changing the water with filtered RO water. And then I basically titrated it to where it was fully just dechlorinated tap water.
Yeah.
And then I have heard of other folks who have strains that are basically all they have to do is add dechlorinator to the water and they're fine. So really it's just kind of what you do is you slowly change it to what you're doing and be consistent at that point. Don't change things like that.
Nice. And so you talk about strains. I see you're keeping 2 different strains. Maybe talk about some of the differences or why.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Daphnia Magna are much larger. They're a couple of millimeters in like size. So if you were to look at them, that's what we harvested, right? So this is Magna. So huge pink people in there. And then there's Moina, which is a smaller strain. The reason why I keep both is fry grow at whatever rates they want to grow at. So you'll find that different fry at different sizes will want different food. And so I find that Daphnia, they're really great at filter feeding the fry powdered food that you feed your fry. So if I were to, let's say I'm trying to grow up a group of CPDs. So the CPD fry, they're all relative sizes. They're all different rates of growth and things like that. None of them are large enough to eat a Daphnia Magna adult, right? Daphnia Magna is obviously large, but Daphnia are so prolific that if you were to put if I were to dump this entire thing into a 10-gallon with baby CPDs and feed it powdered fry food, these guys would procreate and make very small versions of themselves. And those small foods would eventually be enticing and palatable enough for the CPD fry. So you're feeding the tank, right? There's the idea of feeding the tank. So I powder the tank with fry food, and some of that powder is getting eaten by the adult Daphnia, some of it's getting eaten by the very smallest of CPDs, and then you have those in-between CPD sizes that are feasting on baby Daphnia, basically. And so that's kind of the value of something this large.
And how often, so like let's say you did inoculate a tank with those, how often are they having babies and things like that? What's the reproduction rate when you say, hey, I want to make a lot more? Like what's your, I guess, ramp up time and things like that look like on these guys for you?
Honestly, it's pretty quick with Daphnia. So I have a tank over there with Corydoras hostatus, and within that tank, there's larger like adult Daphnia that are in there. And so if the water quality is good, if you don't have any Hydra, which you don't want to have if you have fry, usually because the Hydra will predate on the fry. If the water quality is good, Hydra are non-existent, then usually within a day or two, the Daphnia will be still happy. You're feeding, if you're feeding powdered fry food consistently, you should have the Daphnia procreating at the normal rates that they would, which is exponential, right? So obviously Daphnia are asexually reproducing. So within maybe a couple of days, you'll have, you know, Daphnia babies. And so at that point, it takes off pretty quickly. If you find that you inoculate a tank and it's not taking off pretty quickly, usually it's because you might have Hydra or you might have other things pecking them off, basically.
Do you run into any issues with like hang-on back filters or canisters?
Yes. So I imagine that the finer the micron, the more trouble you would have, just because in my experience, if it's, I would say like, if you did a co-op sponge with the extra fine version, I find that that's not as conducive to what environment they want. I'm thinking that it's taking out a lot of those particles that would be actually feeding,
Pre-filtering the food you would want.
So I would definitely say that I've had the most luck with like a coarse sponge filter.
Okay.
I haven't had any hang-on backs. I can't imagine that they love the turbulence.
Right.
So I don't know that even if you had like a sponge on the intake that it would be like the best time for them. But it could also be a surface area thing. So like if you had like a 20 long and you had a hang on back all the way over here and they had an area where it was slow water movement. So it's all about what kind of micro environments you also have to them and are providing to them. So if you think about it that way, you could maybe get around using a hang on back.
You run any filtration in these?
Nope. They are all air driven. So there's aeration. These are just air lines here, very slow. There are, in some of these, I added some ceramic bio rings. But obviously it's not being run through any kind of way, actual filters. So they're just kind of like there as like a surface area. But outside of whatever's being established with these photosynthetic bacteria on the bottom, because again, this is a 24-hour light. So you do have some folks that are metabolizing waste, but definitely not as efficiently as you would have if you had like an actual filter. So
a couple other things. How are you keeping green water? Like, are you culturing it somewhere else? Because these guys will eat it all if you're not careful, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
So a lot of what's happening here is different cycles. So I've got a system now where I have one mega culture of each kind, right? So you got your Magna, your Moina, and then I have 3 satellite cultures of each kind, or 4, I guess, for the Moina. And so what happens is it's kind of like skateboarding. So like you kind of just go with the flow. And so some of these are going to have green water that are going off really well. So like these guys here, then others are going to be like, okay, the Daphnia are blooming in these. So, and that's when the green water is kind of dialing down. Usually I'll have at least 2 or 3 of these that have an active green water culture. And so what I do when I want to harvest green water to feed to something else, I do the same thing. So this is a very, very, very fine, is it baby brine shrimp net? So I would just use the exact same net system that we would have used. And so instead of harvesting Daphnia, you're harvesting green water. So I guess you could harvest the Daphnia, you would just keep the green water, right? So then you would do this. I always pick the wrong side of these things. Run it through. And this catches the copepods in addition to all the other things, but absolutely catches the Daphnia. And actually, you can put this one in water so you can see it, because this is
That one might have been Moina, so we can see the size
smaller.
of people.
So sometimes you get some contaminants. So that's Asian lady beagle. Met her demise in there, so that's what that orange thing is. But that's adult Moina, which is a lot different than...
Which is much smaller.
Much, much smaller, and I would say more tolerant of less air.
Okay.
In my experience, but maybe it's just a thing that
and if someone was going, I'm going to try Daphnia for the first time, which one of those 2 do you recommend for them to... You want to go smaller, or you want to go with the bigger Magna? I mean, obviously, what fish they keep...
I would want to know... Well, definitely what fish are they keeping. This strain came from Carolina Biologicals, that Moina did. I don't know if it's a matter of source, but would recommend people trying the Moina and just doing them in a jar.
Well, you seem to be... Anyone can order those up. They're like $40 plus shipping, but you know, you could order that right now.
But it's my experience that these guys seem to be a lot more tolerant of just different things that you want to try. However, I find that these are really rewarding to feed off of, especially if you have larger fish. The way that I kind of, in my mind, I'm like, okay, are we making enough Daphnia? Usually my wife will ask like, hey, what's going on with the Daphnia Magna? Because she uses them for her wild discus. So,
okay.
Yeah, she'll come and ask me about that. But this is how we harvest green water. So then what you have is just green water. That's obviously Hydra-free because you have to be Hydra-free and all these other things. So then what I would do is I would just feed it off to another culture. So then it's, you know.
And then I'll play the internet. What if I'm at home and I don't have green water? Do I order it? Do I make it? How do I...
Honestly, it's a lot easier than you think to make it, honestly. I didn't start any of these with like a a pure green water anything from the internet. I literally I breed superworms for my bearded dragon. I took a dead superworm and just regular water, threw it in there, and with the light and the dead superworm, it just green water instantly. So basically, a mummy source. You could do it with easy green, right? So
Yep, I've done that a lot. I've done a handful
bunch of easy green,
grass
shrimp and, you know, fish safe. Take a whole bunch, blah, 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 blah. Let it go. It'll be green in less than a week. So, you know, that's something that you can do.
Do you find how much light matters or just 24 hours? Like, does it need to be super bright or not so much?
Honestly, I've had success with one that runs 24 hours, and I've also had success with one that cycles with the fish room lights. So the other systems that we have set up in the other room, that's a normal fish room light cycle. I find that with the satellite cultures, they seem to be much more tolerant of the number of occupants when the light spectrum is just like full on 24 hours all the time. I don't know if that's because of the photosynthetic bacteria that are actually like metabolizing everything and just kind of keeping everything going. That could be it. I don't know if that's a thing, but it could be.
All right, let's feed some, and then let's check out those satellite cultures, because I know they're basically like in buckets, and people, this looks real like, oh, I don't know if I could build all that. That's a lot, where, oh, I have a bucket.
Yeah. So I find that, I don't know if you want to feed them here.
Wherever you would like. I'm just...
Yeah, so I feel like our rice fish really love them. And they usually know what's going on.
Oh yeah, they know.
What I can do, let's do this.
Yeah, now they... One of the things I love about Daphnia is if they don't eat it all for some reason, they just live and make more. Whereas like a brine shrimp, like, well, they don't live forever in freshwater.
Struggle with these lids sometimes, but so then the Daphnia will be attracted to the light, and as soon as all of the ice kind of settles there, you'll be able to see.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch right down here too. And so yeah, you know, 2-inch fish eating the Magna, no problem.
We do a lot of clown killifish breeding, so rocket killies are fun. These guys really like the Moina. He's a lot smaller. And they kind of know.
Yeah, they're eating them, but it's because they're not orange like brine shrimp. They're harder to see because they're translucent too. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of fun to feed there. And then the satellite cultures you can go and talk about.
Yeah, let's take a look at those. So I'm guessing you recommend to keep multiple cultures going. I know I've crashed my culture.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you aren't going to crash a culture, I think having multiple cultures going, because you're going to have some going gangbusters, some not, right? So you've got, this is the guy that's, this what I would say mid, you know, in terms of like production, but there are some folks in there, and I feel like if I fed them, they would all be kind of at the top. This one is a relic of my old system. So I used to have this whole table full of these tubs, and I got it to a point where I could dial it in and keep it in a smaller footprint. So
nice.
Super exciting for us, because then we could use this area for different projects. And so here's another example.
And so no air in this one.
Exactly. So here's another example of a satellite culture, but this one is back style. So this is a style that I started experimenting with about 2-3 weeks ago. So what I did was I literally just harvested as much green water as possible for my cultures during a water change, threw it all in here, did 1 scoop of Daphnia into that bucket, let it go, and I just fed it regularly like I fed the other cultures, and I noted that they did really, really well. So they came out.
Nice.
I tried these two out differently. So this guy has a slew of the bio rings at the bottom here. And so bio rings, green water, no snails, no nothing, just the green water and the Daphnia.
All right.
And I was like, okay, I wonder if snails or anything make a difference. And this one I started with no rings at the bottom, but they do have snails. This one's a little bit more of a co-culture. And so I find that with co-cultures, it's just, you kind of at that point are putting a lot of eggs in the hands of nature and figuring it out, right? So there's less control here, but more stability. I find that this culture can handle whatever I throw at it, really. And I feel like when you know what you're doing and you can scale it up and down and you're ready to like risk it all basically in this one bucket, then you can kind of be rewarded by that batch kind of style. And so this is more reminiscent to me of like how we culture brine shrimp now, right? Like in one container, and then at some point you'll harvest all of this, feed it all off, do whatever you want to do.
Do any issues with like calcium or pH crashing or anything?
That's a good question. I haven't, because I change water every time I harvest.
Okay.
I find that if I have a concern, so if I'm looking at the Daphnia, and it's easier to observe with Magna, if they're molting and their molts seem like they're kind of sticking to the larger organisms, and I'm like, that looks like a sketchy molt, I'll throw in some easy shrimp and snail. So I'll throw in at least one of those into just a large bin like that, and I'll be like, okay, let me try that. I also try to run crushed coral with a lot of any of my systems, really, just because of that, our water is just a little bit softer. So yeah, I would say if you stay on top of your husbandry, you shouldn't have problems with pH crashes, but usually the animals will tell you something's wrong before it actually happens. So I find that I'll see a bunch of cherry shrimp at the top or something. You can take.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I'm going to take away is like, yeah, the canary in the mine shaft is what I don't have, and I just wait until, the Daphnia were the canary and they're dead now. Like, I waited too long.
Yeah, and I can find that they're usually pretty tolerant of like literally anything but like chemicals. So like overspray of, gosh, like hand soap, or I use bleach and stuff to kind of sanitize some of our hoses and things. So I have to be really careful about where I'm spraying that. So yeah, they seem to be sensitive with those things. But in terms of like ammonia, I haven't tested these with the strips. I could.
I've tested for ammonia before. In my experience, they can live in ammonia off the charts.
Right?
And right off the charts. But that's why I was asking about chloramine, because like chemicals, the smallest amount, like, you had perfume on your wrist, you have a dead Daphnia culture, like. Or a little bit of soap from washing your hands because you're worried about getting perfume.
You play with your dogs and you have like flea and tick stuff on them. Like, that turns into like a whole thing. So
I think my last question, because I know the internet will be asking, like, you've got all of this Daphnia, and I know you guys sell fish. Do you sell and ship any Daphnia?
We haven't before, but I can't imagine that it would be any different than shipping shrimp. So we've definitely done that before.
All right. We'll put some up on the screen and you guys can try and figure out what's that price. Because I know I've ordered Daphnia online a bunch, and I always more reassured when like I could do a bucket, where it's like you start reading the supply and they're like, okay, they're explaining it for like a scientist lab. And you're like, well, I don't know if I have that. I don't have the $300 green water culture-y thing.
You don't even need a carbon filter. Well, depending on your water, right? So if you have chloramines or whatever, but I even did this bucket. I sat out with just regular tap water and I let it do the evaporation thing. So like I didn't add dechlorinator to that.
Nice.
And then the green water that went in there was obviously green water from the other cultures.
Any last must-know Daphnia things while people sat through 33 minutes, and so they're invested into getting Daphnia going? You got any last, I would do this?
Understand what your habits are and build your culture around your habits. If you know that you're a lazy fish keeper,
that's me.
There is a way to do Daphnia where it's prolific enough, because they are fecund enough. If you get them dialed in, you'll be fine. But don't go in thinking like, okay, I'm gonna be out here feeding lots of yeast and then lots of water changes. Like, yes, to shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars, but if you know that you are a lazy Daphnia keeper, then maybe start off with a frozen piece of zucchini in the bucket.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna
throw the Daphnia on top after a couple of days, like, that, right?
I might even be a step lazier. I'm gonna try green beans out of a can.
Yep, green beans out of a can, right? I said earlier about the fry food, like, if you know that you're not into weird stinky stuff, maybe do like the powdered fry food or like something like that, right? Something that you're already tolerant enough.
I know in my mind, the way I'm gonna approach it, because I've got Daphnia at home, I'm gonna target feed like shrimp and snails in the tank, and then feed a little bit on the Daphnia, and I'm going to try to get my culture sustaining on feeding the tank or the shrimp, and then I get this amount of Daphnia as a byproduct instead of I need pounds of Daphnia.
Yes. And then the second big takeaway is understand that if your culture isn't as tolerant to however you're keeping it in the beginning, don't be deterred. Continue doing what you're doing and stay with it. Even if you get like a handful of survivors, reset it, and keep doing what you're doing. And eventually you'll have a strain that's thriving for you in your environment that you have set up.
I thought about one more question that I was going to ask off camera, and I thought, ask it here. Have you run into any temperature sensitivity? Like, don't let them go above this, or...
That's a good question. So we run our fish room right now. It's running a little cooler because we have the windows and things open. So our actual fish room ambient temperature is anywhere from like 83 to 84, depending.
Yeah, that's...
So the actual tank temperature, though, that's usually around 75, 78, just depending on where they are in the fish room.
Yeah.
The lights themselves do get off some heat. I find that Daphnia they don't mind hot. And I feel like they're less productive when it's colder. So it's not that they're impossible to breed or do it. It's just that their metabolism slows down just like any other organism. And so you'll find that it's a lot more frustrating to be like, all right, come on, take off, you know? And so it's probably a lot easier to overfeed and things during those times. And if you know anything about algae, or at least the algae that I grow, usually when it's warmer, it's a lot easier to grow green water. It's a lot harder to do that in cold water. So
awesome. Well, if you stayed this long to learn about Daphnia, make sure you watch the other video about their entire fish room, because it's also amazing, and you'll get another hour and 45 minutes of straight learning.